So welcome to Decoding COVID, one of its kind medical hackathon. This is for the participants. I'm sure you must have read Sir's bio when you registered for the event. Founder of Mice Labs, investor for frugal startups, a force for social change through startups like Buybox and Awaz, and the author of several books. The list goes on. Yet yesterday night, I hit a complete blank. So how should I introduce Sir? It definitely wasn't for the lack of things to speak about. A person of Sir's status must have heard all kinds of introductions extolling Sir's virtues. I could think of nothing new for Sir to hear. And thus, like the modern millennial looking for information on a person, I decided to access Sir's social accounts. I opened up Sir's Twitter. So on Sir's Twitter,
Can't
I
open
saw
up my LinkedIn anymore. I've been kicked out of LinkedIn. You know that, right? My LinkedIn had a lot more stuff than my Twitter does. My Twitter stuff is relatively new. But so part of the reason I also do that, very frankly, let's skip all the introduction stuff. I always think introduction should be given after the talk, at which point people say, "Kya yaar, fukat ka bore kar diya. I could have done better things with my life." So let's just move on. And
Okay, sir,
people
sure,
come
sir.
not to listen to what the speaker has done or whatever. They want to see, okay, what am I going to get out of this presentation? And I'm a big believer. Presentations need to be entertaining and they need to add value to whoever is attending them. I mean, you're taking 1 hour of your Sunday. You could have been doing better things. Of course, you could have been hanging out with your girlfriend anymore or boyfriend, whatever it is. But I'm sure there would have been things you could do. And you're choosing to spend it listening to this. So straightforward enough. I think, I used to be a medical student many years ago, I know. But some things haven't changed and some things have. And that's some of the stuff we need to talk about. Why has the pace of change been so slow and what can we do in order to increase some of it? Couple of things. You don't need to take notes during this presentation. I'm going to request the SAMHSA team to send the entire presentation to you. So it will be available on the SAMHSA website or Facebook or wherever you want. Guys, please share. The only request I have with everyone is we all have stories to tell. Sometimes we underestimate our ability to tell the stories. And sometimes we think, who's going to be interested in my story? Kya badi baat hai? And I think that in itself is a mistake. The more the stories you tell, the better you will get at storytelling. And all of us have something unusual, whether you're you sweep the streets, you're a garbage worker, you're a CEO of a company. There is something which has happened, which is special. And I think the one thing we can do, and the one thing the internet allows us to do, is to be generous about sharing. So that's the request. People are very curious what it takes to be a doctor. What do medical students do? How did you manage when you saw your first dead body? I mean, you've even forgotten about that, unfortunately. And the advantage of sharing stories now is you'll have great stories to share with your grandchildren. Okay, so I think this is something, so I'm going to basically break this up into two parts. One is the fact that you're medical students and you've got so much on your plate that the last thing you need to sit and worry about is innovation. Yaar, exam to pass karne de, postgraduate seat to milne de, innovation dekhenge. And I completely get that. I'm not saying no. And if you say being a doctor is not easy, neither is being a medical student. And in fact, that's a big cause of concern, all these regulations, what have I let myself in for? And the trouble with a medical college seat is it's all one way. Once you're in, it's very hard to get out because even if you do, people say, kya gada tha, fukat ki seat waste kar di. Even if you hate what you're doing, you hate your teachers, you hate everything. And, a lot of times we are very young when we get into medical college. We really don't know what we're signing up for. And you're so pleased. Hey, I'm such a smart guy. I got the marks. I got in. Of course, I'm going to take the seat. See what a great college I am in. And then sometimes you kind of, especially at night when you can't go to sleep, or you read about some article about some doctor being locked up by some judge, or hospitals being broken up, or people dying of COVID when they were medical students. Lots of things you worry a little bit. But I agree with you, it's not easy. But the reality is it's never been easy. Nothing is ever easy. And it's a question of how you look at it. It's actually, you get the opportunity to make changes. And that's what I'm going to focus on. This is where a lot of doctors think, just too many of us. And you're so busy competing. And that's something we've done all our lives, haven't we? We're very good at competing with each other. Very good at getting more marks than everyone else, having secret clinics, doing, learning how to crack exams, all the other stuff, none of which is clinically important, but we do that. And there's some things I'm going to focus on. And one of them is some of the stuff which people don't teach us. And the first is ethics. You might wonder why. And in one sense, really, you know, by the time you've joined college, if your ethics aren't sorted out, they're never going to be sorted out. And really teaching you the right thing to do is something your parents and your grandparents instill in you. But the problem is, it's so easy to take shortcuts. It's so easy to cheat. It's so easy to see people do wrong. And then I strongly recommend don't get misled and blindsided by all that stuff. Find one good person whom you can trust, whom you can honor. And often, you know, your mentors could be books. And that's perfectly fine. And, you know, these books have stood the test of time and that message is timeless. But ideally find someone in real life you can reach out to. At least you won't get so disillusioned when you hear so much rubbish. Okay. Guess what? I have, okay, sorry. Okay, this should be fine. So, and I think we've all aware of this. It's like, you know, sometimes you wonder and you hear horror stories from your seniors who started practice about how corrupt everything is. And it's like, what can I do if everyone else does it? My professor does it, my senior does it. This is the only way things are done. The reality is that's not. And there's no reason why you need to do the same kind of rubbish everyone does. I think this is the other thing. And, you know, I mean, you won't get books on empathy, but I think it's important. Actually, far more important than empathy is what I think is called compassion. And if you're not a kind doctor, don't be a doctor in the first place, really. There's so many hajar things you can do, earn more money, do lots of stuff. And I think the magic sauce of being a doctor is you can be kind to people one-on-one. And they appreciate that. And the emotional income you can get is far more than it. You know, people will bow down to politicians and bureaucrats and administrators, but they're really bowing down to that chair which those guys are occupying. Whereas when you get them better and you see the smile on their face and they say, thank you, doctor, they're thanking you as an individual. You know, may not mean anything to you if you don't want it to, but honestly, that is priceless. And I think everyone should watch Munnabhal every once in a while. It'll teach you what not to do and equally what to do. And, you know, well, before you became a doctor, don't forget you were a human. And you will always remain a human. Please don't lose your humanity no matter what. Sometimes as doctors, we tend to get a little arrogant. I know so much. We get irritated with patients. Arey, ek page Google search kar diya, to usko kya lagta hai? But don't do that. You know, I mean, the guy is sick, worried, not sure if you have time or energy for him. Give him a break. This, I think, is important. And people sometimes forget. What does equity mean? Equity means equality, which means you treat everyone the same, not just the politicians who come to you and, you know, not just the VIP. Everyone should be a VIP. I think that's the only way to deal with this. But the trouble is we've let ourselves get cut off. And partly that's the way the education system is spent. If all day long you're either in the library or in the ward or in the clinic or in the classroom or in the canteen, you know, you don't really get a time to do anything else and you cut yourself off from the rest of the world. Big mistake. Don't do that. You need to understand and spend some time talking to your patients. They've all got interesting stories to share, not just about when did your pain start, what makes it better, what makes it worse. And the great thing is they'll tell you things you'll never get to hear otherwise. So think about that. You know, no one likes this PSM or preventive and social medicine and community medicine, but actually it's one of the most important things. I think especially if nothing else, COVID has taught you that, you know, you can't afford to skip this particular chapter in your books. And I think part of the problem is we're great at providing one-on-one care, and that's important, but you can't afford to lose sight of the big picture. And there are two things I want to emphasize. What does positive deviance mean? It means we're so focused on what is broken and what is wrong, and we're so good at whining and whinging and complaining so-and-so is bad. And the positive deviants are the guys who are doing a good job in spite of the fact that the odds are stacked against them. Learn from them. They should be your role models. And in spite of everything, they can do it. And that's why we admire people like Dr. Albert Schweitzer, that, you know, born privileged and yet chose to, you know, go to Africa and do something just out of the goodness of his heart. And what are upstreamists? I think part of the problem is when you start specializing. So for example, for an IVF specialist, every patient is infertile until proven otherwise, which means we kind of forget that, you know, most people happily have babies in the bedroom without any assistance from us, which means anytime you see a report, it's always, this is the reason for the infertility. Could be a red herring, could be irrelevant. And that's something to remember. Remember the big picture. Equally important, your job is not to fix problems one-on-one. What does upstream mean? Upstream means is that if people are falling into the river and dying and you're having to save them after drowning by doing CPR, you're going to find out why they're falling into the river, which means you have to go upstream and then you'll figure out, array, the barrier which prevented people from jumping into the river accidentally has broken down. So if you fix that particular barrier, that fence, you'll have much more impact than you would otherwise. You know, honestly, if cardiologists just stopped doing cardiology and focused on educating people to stop smoking, they would actually save more lives. Doesn't say much about cardiologists, but never mind. Economics, yeah, money, big issue. You know, no one wants to talk about it, but it's important. It's the elephant in the room. But one thing I will emphasize, doctors are daily wage earners. You earn more than enough. I'm not complaining about that, but the fact still remains is that you're dependent on that, and that's not great. And I'll tell you why. And that's why passive income is so great. And that's the reason why I lead a free life. I don't have to give a single cut or a kickback or a commission to anyone. Patient bhejna hai to bhej, acha doctor, nahi bhejna hai, baad mein ja. Otherwise, if this was my only source of income, I would have to bow down and kowtow and, that other IVF specialist is giving a 50% cut, मैं 60% cut दूंगा. बस patient भेज, नहीं तो मेरे बच्चे भूख से मर जाएंगे. All that kind of justification and rationalization. And fortunately, I don't need to do that because I've invested in the stock market. So enough passive income. So if patients come, I enjoy seeing them, happy to treat them. But even if they don't, my life doesn't end. So I think that's important. But don't compromise your ethics just for the sake of your income. At the end of the day, you need to live with yourself. Education, again, big problem. It's like, you've got so much stuff. And, I don't think I would ever get into medical college today. I've seen some of those exams and I'm sure I wouldn't even get into postgraduate street. They ask you arcane, irrelevant, pointless questions. It doesn't make any sense. I guess they have to do that because you have 1,000 bache hai and you only have 10 seats. So how do you separate? But they use exactly the wrong metric. Anyway, so you have all that stuff. And like I tell everyone, the problem, of course, is that half of the stuff which they teach you will be wrong, but you don't know which half. And that's why it's so important to become self-learners and, figure out stuff for yourself. And that's the great thing about the internet. And honestly, you guys should be able to teach your professors and teachers and take pride in that. And good teachers will take pride in the fact that you can teach them because your ability to remain up to date with a lot of stuff is far more than theirs. And that's why don't say, oh, this was in my book or this was it, or this is what my professor taught me. Never good enough. There's a difference between eminence-based education and evidence-based medicine. And you need to remember the difference. When I talk about education, this is what I talk about, using information therapy to put patients first. And I'll tell you why. If you can educate your patients, this obviously means that you know so much about what you're doing, that you can simplify it, you can get rid of the jargon, and you can answer the basic questions which your patients ask. And of course, the guy who doesn't know anything will either put patients in their place or start using jargon like, oh, you have an SVT and you have this, that, and the other. And, it's easy to mystify everything else to prove that you're the expert, but actually that just means that you're not very sure or confident and you're trying to conceal your lack of knowledge. This, of course, we know. And I think this is the one thing I would tell. In fact, I would insist that every SAMHSA member, one of the preconditions for joining is, of course, pay the fees, but have your own website. And I'll tell you why. Because this gives you so much amplification, leverage, voice. Doctors are trusted, guys. But, how many people can you interact with in your clinic? 10, 20, 30. Maybe if you're a medical professor, maybe more. But obviously, your impact is limited. And people still trust doctors. And if you're generous and you're willing to share how much you know and how much you have learned, do this for selfish reasons also. Because it'll give you digital, valuable real estate, which will remain with you all your life. Even when you want to apply for a job or become a professor or start practice, this will always be there. And it'll discipline you to look at life from a patient's point of view, because your patients will be on the site and they'll ask you questions. And more importantly, it'll force you to remain up to date with technology. When I started, I used to know HTML. I mean, that's irrelevant now. But and I can't do Laravel and all the other stuff, but I can still manage WordPress, and I don't need to do it anymore, but it's helpful to at least understand what's happening, and this helps to keep me up to date. So I think every doctor needs their own website. This is the one thing we need less of. Guys, please. The trouble is we take undue credit. Patient gets better, got better because of me. Patient got worse in spite of me. Honestly, trust me, it's often the other way around. Sometimes patients get better in spite of you. But anyway, so just understand that, don't take credit for everything which happens in life. This I think is important, and that's what I call the trust equation. And I spend a little bit more time on this. It's really simple. Why would patients trust you? And actually, patients don't trust doctors. So half my first consultation is explaining to patients why I'm trustworthy and why I'm not the rest of the medical profession, because it's our medical profession which has actually let patients down and let ourselves down. By not stopping some of the corrupt malpractices, which open secrets, everyone knows they're happening. And yet we kept quiet. And we kept quiet, and we kept quiet. So that at one time it used to be 5% of doctors were corrupt, then it became 10%, 50%, now it's 80%, maybe more in certain towns. So obviously we've lost all our moral authority. We can't police our own colleagues. Why would anyone trust us? And so now it's doctor is crooked until proven otherwise. I really wouldn't blame the patient for that. And actually you guys have a chance to fix some of this stuff by explaining your perspective, where you come from. So please take advantage of this. And you can do stuff which honestly your professors, teachers, practitioners can't, because you have the time, you have the energy. And at this stage in your life, you're still empathetic. Medical college hasn't squeezed all that compassion out of you. Unfortunately, it will at some point. Hopefully not, but there is really a risk that it will. And if you remember this, I think it'll help. So again, simple. Credibility means when you say something, doctors are not trusted anymore. Patients will Google. I'm guaranteeing you that right now. So can he trust what you say? And ideally what you should do is refer him to your website and provide links to other websites. So you can say, yeah, jo bol raha hai, sach bol raha hai, sensible hai. That increases the trust far more and saves you a lot of time. Trust me, then you don't have to go through it all again. You can say, okay, before coming for the consultation, go visit the website. After the consultation, tell your sister-in-law who's in USA who wants to find out dhang se kar raha hai ki nahi, ki doctor gada hai ki nahi. She can go to the website. So many things. What does reliability mean? It means that if you tell the patient, I'm going to phone you with your lab result tomorrow, do you do that or not? Can he trust that, when you say something, he will actually do it? And if you can't do it, then will you respond to him and tell him why not and then fix the problem? Intimacy. Are you interested in him as a person, or are you just interested in him as a uterus where I'm going to do the surgery and remove the uterus? Sometimes we get so focused on, our little technical expertise that we forget that there's a human being who has this. And self-orientation means, are you going to worry more about how much money you can make off him, or are you going to care about him first? So honestly, I would, even if I had to do this all over again, I had a second life, I'd still want to be a doctor. But it's great. It nurtures you literally. It's, you feel good about it. And I think part of the problem is when a patient says thank you to you, enjoy that moment. You don't get that moment in many other professions. Trust me. People, when you go to a politician, he doesn't trust you because, he knows that you have an axe to grind, you want a favor. And that doesn't happen when you're dealing with a doctor. And like I said before, if you don't worry so much about your financial income, sure, the guy who came last in class, who passed because he used to cheat from your papers, who's now finished his BCom LLB and is now driving a Mercedes, and you're still stuck on your two-wheeler, trust me, your emotional income is still better than his. So that should be fine. And if you value that emotional income, you'll be sorted. Again, if I had to simplify everything, I would just keep on reminding everyone that it's only your patients who count. Everything else is secondary. Never forget that. And everything I've said, we have this website. I'll share the link. It's called The Best Medical Care. And this book is called Successful Private Practice. It should have been called Successful Medical Practice because it applies whether you're a government bureaucrat or you're in the medical services or whatever else. And you can get all this information. As you can see, there are lots of books. There's one for patients, there's one for doctors, and wrote the books a long time ago, but interestingly, nothing has changed. How could it possibly change? Doctors are doctors, patients are patients, we're all human beings. The basics don't change. Technical minutiae and stuff will, I mean, when we started, we couldn't do ICSI, and today I can do ICSI, but everything else is still the same. Okay, guys, have you guys gone to sleep or we're still okay? How do I make out? Okay, I think this is the one thing I really don't like about this thing, because you never know what people are doing. But I'm assuming you're still awake. I used to tell Krishna, I used to give chocolates and candies and ask questions during a real life thing so you can make out. And instead of candies, I would have those little spitballs. If anyone is sleeping, my aim wasn't very good, so I'd mostly end up hitting the other guy who would then nudge the fellow who was sleeping, whatever. But at least they all woke up. Here, I'm not sure whether people are not or what. But so coming back again, so I think it's important. You need to study what's in your textbooks, but all that is stuff which has happened in the past. And the reality is, changes occur. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to be a lot of stuff which is just not there in your textbooks and will never be there. And how do you manage some of these things? And don't expect your teachers to teach you, please. There's no subject called putting patients first. There's no subject called empathy. Maybe someone will talk about it. Maybe they won't. And this is stuff you need to figure out for yourself. I enjoyed doing this because no one really understood what an angel investor was. I think people still don't understand what an angel investor is. I'll come back to that. But why did we want to start off in hospitals? Why does innovation have to start? And the tragedy is, it used to once upon a time. I don't know whether you heard these stories about this cardiologist who did the first cardiac catheterization, and he used himself as a guinea pig. He actually put a wire into his own heart to see whether it would work or not. Boss, guts. I'm sure I won't have the guts to do that. You've never done it before, but just imagine the amount of confidence. And I'm not telling you need to catheterize yourself, but the point is that that's where the patients are and that's where the doctors are. And in medical, innovation doesn't start from the bedside. Why do you expect some engineer sitting in IIT who's done some model on AI or ML or whatever it may be, and will think he knows what patients and doctors need? Boss, we deal with them, we know. So why hospitals? And why JJ Hospital especially? Because there's cross-disciplinary collaboration. Everything's under one roof. Your patients are there, your senior doctors are there, and you can all get together. You can invite guys from IT. And let me tell you one thing, the biggest problem, a lot of these guys, whether it's BETIC or whatever else, actually envy you. And they sometimes have an inferiority complex because how hard it is to get permission to even get into JJ Hospital. Ask Krishna if you want. But इससे permission मांगो, assistant dean को मिलो, फिर ये badge निकालो, फिर नहीं अभी office बंद हो गया है, कल आओ, ये मेरा ward है, तुमने प्रोफेसर से परमिशन, अरे नहीं डीन ने परमिशन दिया, कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, मैं हेड ऑफ मेडिसिन है, मेरे से मांगो, हेड ऑफ मेडिसिन ने दिया तो क्या हुआ? I am, anyway. So just 50 different things. And the great thing is when you're working in a hospital, you don't have to worry about all that. Huge privilege. But for me, the most important thing is you can talk to patients directly and you can talk to the caregivers. Such a valuable source of insights. We are actually so myopic. We think everything which happens to a patient happens within the four walls of a clinic or a hospital. Patients have a life far more interesting than ours often, which happens outside the hospital, and this gives you a chance. And my aunt, for example, just had a stroke, and I realized how terrible bedpans are. And I thought about it. I mean, why do they need to be made of steel or plastic? Why can't we make them kind of 50 different things? And no one's ever bothered. So, but the opportunities are still there. As I said before, you can't just use your patients as guinea pigs. That's what you have senior doctors, and senior doctors are great because they've traveled the world. They've been doing this for 10 years. They understand what patients need. They understand what their things are, and they can come out and say, hey, can you help me do this? And that's such a great partnership. I'm sure you've all heard this, so I'm not belaboring the issue, but I love the fact that this has a process, that you first don't start with a bright idea. It's okay to have bright ideas. I have lots of bright ideas. Anyone wants any, just reach out to me and I'm happy to share them with you. But a bright idea is important, but it's often neither necessary nor sufficient. But you first define what the needs are, then you design prototypes. And that's the reason we love the work which Krishna is doing at Mice Labs. You actually get to tinker with your hands. A lot of guys would have been great engineers, but they couldn't do both IIT and medicine, though they got admission into both. So they had to pick and choose, but they still want to be able to tinker. And, the opportunities are here. I mean, whether it's 3D printing or whatever else. And then the great thing is after you've tinkered, you can take it to the bedside, see whether it works, doesn't work. The nurse will tell you this is stupid, it's too bulky, it broke, whatever else it is. And then, of course, deploying in the market is a long way off, but this at least is the big picture, the roadmap. I think this is important. And I'm not trying to make you guys engineers. There's no need to do that. But we both come with different worldviews, and it's completely important. We treat patients one at a time. We don't want to fiddle around with patients, and you want to try a new method of removing the appendix in the middle of an operation, do you? You don't want surgeons who are cowboys. So you have to be conservative. And engineers are completely different. That's what I like about engineers. They don't just fix one patient at a time, and then a second patient at a time, and then a third patient at a time. And then that's great for the doctor, because the more the patients he fixes one at a time, the more the money he makes. And he never needs to learn anything new, because he's been doing this for so many years, so he's an expert at it. Engineers don't take that approach. Hey, is there a better way of doing it? And I think we need to respect that. So doctors as entrepreneurs, if I were younger, this is what I would have chosen. But anyway, I think you need to understand that the trouble with all this startup press and media is it's all skewed and rubbish. They only talk about the success stories. They don't talk about 99 failures. Your chances of failing are much higher, and that's fine. You'll learn a lot is all I say. But it'll teach you to bounce back from some of your failures. And trust me, you most likely won't make money. But whether you do or not, you'll learn so much about yourself, how to manage a team, how to talk to investors, how to manage accounts, how to manage the world, that will make the world a much more interesting place. There's only one ingredient for success, and this is true whether you're an engineer, an entrepreneur, or a doctor, or a medic, just learn. But the first thing I put is to sell, learn to sell stories. This is true for doctors too, you may not realize that. And lots of doctors do it very subtly. So, when a patient comes in the consultation, the first story they say, I saw a patient just like you 2 weeks ago who was nearly dying, and I did this great dramatic surgery, and now he's absolutely fine. Or, why do you think doctors have photographs of all their celebrities on their wall? Because in one sense, they're telling you the story. Aishwarya Rai sorry, Aishwarya Rai is very old. I guess I'm dating myself. I don't know who the new actresses are. I apologize. But whatever. So, तू किस खेत की मूली है? अगर ऐश्वर्या मुझको trust कर सकती थी, तो of course you can. Anyway, so yes, but I think the important thing is to lead a team. Not easy at all, because part of the problem is the doctors, you think, I know everything. I don't want to learn anything from anyone. Then anyone who doesn't agree with me is by definition an idiot. But it's so hard. I mean, you need to actually do stuff with your hand. Very easy. As an angel investor, I can sit in my air-conditioned room and tell Krishna, do this and Krishna do that. I don't need to do it. But obviously, when you start up from scratch, I finished doing all this, is my point. Be patient and persistent. These things take time. The best way is to actually work in a startup. You learn very, very quickly. And, you can learn from other people's mistakes. Hey, someone is raising hands. What does that mean? I apologize, guys. Am I supposed to do anything, or can I just continue with my presentation?
Sir, you can continue with the presentation. Raising hands, I think the participants would have questions, so we can keep it for the end of the session.
Okay, fine.
If that's okay.
Right. So you
Okay,
can put them. Okay. So then I'll carry on, guys. And again, when I say play to your strengths, you can't be good at everything. That goes without saying. So I'm terrible at the nitty-gritty, but I like the big picture. But then if I want to run a startup, I need to partner with someone who loves doing the nitty-gritty. Stuff I hate and therefore do badly, he enjoys, and vice versa. So we make a good team. And the problem is doctors don't always make very good entrepreneurs. Part of it is because we want to be first, and we're not good at, we don't even bother to listen to our juniors, our nurses, we diss them. Let me ask you one, am I allowed to ask questions? I'm going to ask the question and I want someone to answer it. Does anyone know what medical pimping means? Just put it in the comment section, okay? It's called medical pimping. Anyway, we'll come back to that. It's a form of abuse of medical students and why they end up abusing seniors. And you guys aren't allowed to Google and try to find out what the answer is. Huh? That's cheating. Anyway, so everyone wants to be the captain of the ship. So you don't want to listen to anyone. I'm the boss, everyone. And then you end up micromanaging. You don't know how to delegate. You don't allow your team to make mistakes, and therefore they remain stuck where they are. You remain stuck where you are, and you never get a chance to learn from them. And part of the problem is we're not allowed to do things with our hands. All we do is regurgitate facts again and again. That's not great. We don't have enough role models, not enough success stories. And the reality is it's much easier to just start a clinic or join a job or whatever else. I think these are lost opportunities. Again, big problem. Everyone comes up with this bright idea. Dr. Malpani, I have an idea. Please give me $1 million because so-and-so raised $1 million in Silicon Valley based on a pass. I have lots of ideas. I wish someone would give me money for my ideas. And when I say dime a dozen, I'm not dissing the idea. Please understand that. Everything starts with an idea. No one's saying no. But just starting is not enough. Ideas are necessary, but they're not sufficient. And honestly, the more the ideas, the better for you. Because you'll realize that your initial ideas were such crap that, and the only way you'll realize that is that you'll realize that quality actually is proportional to quantity for certain things. And this is one of them. And biggest problem, oh, I share my idea with an angel investor, he'll tell his cousin to start a startup and his cousin will make so much money and I will be left behind. Forget it. We have more than enough ideas on our plate, and the only way to improve your ideas is to ask for criticism. And that will actually help you improve. And if your idea is so easy to copy, then, once you start, people will copy it anyway. Trust me. So, what's the big deal? It's the implementation, which is your magic sauce. Lots of books for entrepreneurs. Again, I'll share some websites with you. And ideally, you should be reading these books, reviewing these books, sharing what you learn with them from others. They're often much more exciting than your medical books and will tell you there's a whole worldwide world.